We begin here in Japan, where a marked decline in the number of coronavirus cases has officials considering lifting a state of emergency earlier than planned, except for the greater Tokyo area. But there are concerns lifting the decree too early may trigger a rebound in cases. 10 prefectures are currently under the state of emergency. Officials have been urging people to avoid non-essential outings and the managers of bars and restaurants to close early. After 7 weeks under such measures, the government now says the declarations covering Osaka, Aichi, and 3 other prefectures could be lifted before the expiration date on March 7th. It's also considering lifting the measure in Fukuoka as it narrowly meets hospital occupancy criterion. Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide will make a final decision after meeting with experts on Friday.
The government will deliberate the matter by taking into account the number of cases and the healthcare systems, while coordinating with local authorities. We will make a comprehensive judgment after hearing from experts.
But the head of the country's medical association says he remains skeptical.
An early lifting of the state of emergency could send people the wrong message that the situation is already safe.
Health authorities reported more than 1,000 cases across Japan on Thursday. That brings the overall tally to over 430,000. The figure is on the decline, but the pace of decline is slowing down. Moving now to a scandal involving a major Japanese egg producer and top government officials. The Agriculture Ministry has disciplined 6 senior bureaucrats for breaching ethics when the company wined and dined them.
I think all of our officials must take this incident seriously, as it greatly undermines public trust in the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. I'd like to offer my deepest apologies to all citizens.
Nogami says he'll voluntarily give back 1 month's pay, despite the fact that he wasn't in the post at the time. Yoshikawa Takamori was in charge of the ministry when he brought employees out to meals with Akita Foods. The egg producer reportedly foot the bill, dishing out about $200 per person. The ministry says 3 officials, including the vice minister, will get a partial cut in pay for 1 month. At the time, Edamoto Masaaki was the Director General of the Agricultural Production Bureau. Yoshikawa was indicted but not arrested earlier this year on charges of receiving cash bribes from the then head of Akita Foods. The former executive has been charged with paying the bribes. And on to another whining and dining scandal. A senior government official has apologized to the Diet for attending a dinner with the Prime Minister's eldest son paid for by his company. Yamada Makiko was grilled about the scandal by opposition lawmakers.
It was a jaw-dropper for the public to hear that you had accepted a meal costing more than $700.
Yamada, who's now Public Relations Secretary for the cabinet, attended the dinner while she was still a senior official at the Communications Ministry. Satellite broadcasting company Tohoku Shinsha Film Corporation organized and paid for it.
I deeply regret my actions that violated the ethics law for public service. I am very sorry for undermining public trust.
Yamada said the dinner conversation was mostly just general relaxed talk and no one asked for any special treatment. But she admitted she wasn't cautious enough when it came to checking if the company was a stakeholder. Now 11 other officials have been reprimanded for violating the ethics code in connection with the scandal. Yamada has rejected calls to step down. The United Nations nuclear watchdog says it'll work with Japan to dispose of contaminated wastewater accumulating at the Fukushima Daiichi plant. An earthquake and tsunami almost exactly 10 years ago triggered a meltdown that crippled the facility. In an exclusive interview with NHK, Rafael Grossi reflected on what he called a thorough, painstaking exercise of analyzing ways to dispose of the water. It contains tritium and other radioactive substances. A Japanese government subcommittee recommended diluting the water to acceptable levels and then discharging it into the ocean or air. The government has yet to make a final decision. Grossi said the sooner the better. The local fishing industry is worried about business taking a hit over rumors that releasing the wastewater into the ocean will contaminate seafood. Japan's neighbor South Korea has also conveyed serious concern. Grossi said this is where the IAEA can play an integral role.
Because knowing all these difficult circumstances, including the concern that may be expressed by the local population, by neighboring countries, it is important to have the presence of the IAEA. I am a firm believer that having the IAEA closely involved before, during and after the possible release is going to result in a net gain for all, starting with Japan.
Without going into detail, Grossi said his agency is discussing a proposal with its Japanese counterparts to set up joint teams to monitor the discharged water. Chinese President Xi Jinping has declared victory in an effort to eradicate rural poverty. This was one of his government's top priorities.
China has scored a complete victory in the fight against poverty at the significant moment of approaching the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party.
China's leaders have seen a gap between the haves and the have-nots as one of their most pressing challenges. They say nearly 100 million people in rural areas lived below the poverty line in 2012. They set out to cut that number to zero. President Xi said China still has a long way to go in terms of closing the development gap between urban areas and the countryside. Analysts suggest he highlighted the government's achievements in poverty reduction to justify one-party rule and boost his own influence. U.S. regulators say a coronavirus vaccine developed by Johnson & Johnson is safe and effective. This means the nation could soon make a third vaccine after ones developed by Pfizer and Moderna available for emergency use. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has released a detailed analysis following clinical trials of the single-dose vaccine. The global study covered about 40,000 people. The vaccine was 66.1% effective at preventing moderate to severe COVID-19 cases for 28 days after vaccination. And for critical cases, the efficacy rate was 85.4%. While the rates appear lower than the two-dose shots, FDA experts caution the trials and the vaccines themselves are quite different. And this vaccine comes with benefits.
It is refrigerator stable. It can be shipped and stored at refrigerator temperatures. It can once it gets to the final place where it's going to be administered, it's stable in the refrigerator for 3 months. It's given as a single shot.
The regulator is planning to hold a meeting on Friday to decide whether to approve it. If it does, the vaccine is expected to accelerate the pace of inoculations in the United States, as it requires only one jab. Next, the postponed Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics are just months away. But many athletes who hope to compete say they feel poorly prepared, with international competitions canceled and training restricted due to the coronavirus pandemic. Our next report focuses on how para-athletes are trying to overcome the challenges.
Goalball is a sport for players with impaired vision. They must rely on their sense of hearing to compete. Because players come into physical contact with objects and each other, they face an increased risk of catching COVID-19. Therefore, the Japanese team has severely restricted the activities of its athletes and has even pulled out of international competitions. The athletes have been in training camp for about 240 days, which is 4 times longer than usual. But they say that training only domestically makes it difficult to gauge where they stand on a global level, and their improvement is limited.
It's hard to know how good our game sense is unless we compete against athletes from different countries.
The para-swim team has started looking for more opportunities to experience actual competitions. Tomita Uchu is expected to win a medal in the visually impaired category. Last December, he took part in an international tournament after a long hiatus. About 70 athletes from 10 different countries, including the US and Spain, competed in the event. Their performances were broadcast simultaneously. The venue was online.
I'm not actually competing side by side with athletes from other countries. But the thought that I'm vying with them motivates me to work harder.
Meanwhile, the track and field team is hoping to level up by bridging the divide between the Olympics and Paralympics. Para-track and field athletes benefit by competing in this tournament alongside Olympic athletes. The judges learned beforehand the rules of Paralympic track and field competitions. During this challenging contest, a new Japanese Paralympic record was set. Tournaments that combine Olympic and Paralympic events have begun to appear, giving para-athletes valuable opportunities to improve.
I want to promote this cooperation because the more chances there are to compete, the more motivated the athletes become, and the greater the possibility they will excel on the world stage.
As traditional training gets sidelined due to the coronavirus pandemic, athletes and their coaches are continuing to search for ways to increase performance.
Switching gears now to the weather, people in parts of Europe experienced a rare phenomenon Wednesday as they looked up at the sky. Our meteorologist Jonathan O explains what happened in our World Weather Report.
Hello, as we went through Wednesday, we saw an interesting situation taking place as we had some Sahara dust coming out of Africa, moving into the continent of Europe. Take a look at this video. You'll see how the skies are transforming colors because of this. This is because of the strong, dry winds that brought that sand and turned the rising and setting sun into a dusty pink. Now, the unusual scene has surprised residents in many areas of Germany, including Munich. And although the colors were nice to look at, the dust particles added to the air pollution that caused unhealthy air quality and the situation that was particularly hard for the elderly and children. The winds are relaxing just a bit, and so any of the dust that's in place will remain in place, but we're not expecting as much wind to come in from the south as we go through Thursday into Friday. On the contrast, we have a cold front coming in from the north and west, and so that's going to help bring in some rain as we head toward Friday with snow through the weekend, especially on the coastal areas of Norway. Looking at sunny skies in London for Friday, the high of 12. Paris and Berlin looking at some wet weather. Lisbon also seeing some rain as we go through the day. Temperatures are still on the warm side, mid to upper teens, but a little bit touch colder because we're not looking at 20s. As we go into Friday. Meanwhile, across Japan, it has been a relatively calm day. Snow still falling in portions of northern areas of Japan, but we do have a low pressure system that's moving from the west, and that's going to bring in a lot of rain. Some areas can get some heavier rain, so be on the lookout for that, especially for Kyushu and Shikoku. Tokyo may see a chance for some showers, a smaller chance, maybe more toward the southern areas of the Kanto region as we go forth through the day on Friday. Looking at 9 for the high, though, on Saturday in Tokyo, Osaka and Fukuoka looking at wet weather for Friday, so be on the lookout for that. Warmer weather, though, coming up as we go later on. Here's a look at the forecast for Friday around Asia. Hope you have a good day wherever you are.
EU politicians are meeting to work out how to speed up the delivery of vaccines across the continent. The European Commission has been heavily criticised over its vaccination rate. There are also reports of AstraZeneca doses being left unused after mixed messaging. BBC News has learned that the missing Dubai Princess Latifa had asked British police to reinvestigate the disappearance of her elder sister 2 decades ago. Princess Shamsa hasn't been seen in public since. The UN has called on India to urgently rescue a boat it says is stranded at sea with dozens of Rohingya refugees on board. Last year, 200 refugees lost their lives at sea after leaving refugee camps in Bangladesh. And Armenia's Prime Minister has taken to the streets of the capital to try to gather supporters after accusing the military of an attempted coup. He used the same strategy to oust the previous government.